Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Always exciting to be back.
Today we're going to be talking about something pretty serious.
Yeah.
It's elder abuse in America.
It is, unfortunately, a growing problem.
Yeah, and we're going to be using this Newsweek article
Okay.
called Map Shows States with Highest Level of Elder Abuse.
Interesting.
So hopefully by the end of this deep dive,
Yeah.
you'll have a better understanding of where this is happening the most and
Right.
who's most likely behind it all.
Makes sense, yeah.
So right off the bat, this article hits us with a pretty startling statistic.
Okay.
It says that roughly 10%
Oh, wow.
of elderly Americans experience some form of abuse.
10%.
Yeah.
That's 1 in 10.
Yeah, it's a significant portion of the population.
I know.
For sure.
And it really makes you think, shouldn't these be the golden years,
Right. You would think so.
Yeah, so why are we seeing these numbers?
Well, that's exactly what we're going to try to figure out today.
We're going to look at the data, see what it tells us about where the biggest issues are and who might be causing them.
Exactly. And I think a good place to start is with this map that Newsweek included.
Okay, yeah, let's see what it shows.
So it highlights the states with the highest rates of reported elder abuse cases.
Okay.
And at the very top is Washington State.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah, I know Washington doesn't exactly scream elder abuse hotspot, does it?
No, not really. What are the numbers like there?
They're seeing a crazy 3,597 reported cases per 100,000 people.
Wow, that's a lot higher than I would have guessed.
Right, and that's just for people aged 65 and over.
So what do you think is going on in Washington that's leading to these high numbers?
Well, it could be a few things, right?
Yep.
I mean, each state has its own laws, reporting procedures,
Right.
and funding for adult protective services.
Right. Different levels of resources and awareness could definitely play a role.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe Washington's just better at identifying and reporting these cases.
It's possible that they're just more on top of things.
But even if that's the case, there's clearly still a problem.
Right. Oh, for sure. Those numbers are still alarming.
Yes. So what makes Washington different?
Well, if we dig a bit deeper into the data,
Okay.
we see that financial exploitation is a huge issue in Washington.
Really? How so?
They're reporting an average of almost 12,000 cases of financial exploitation each year.
12,000.
Yeah, that's a lot. And remember, this is just one state we're talking about.
Wow. This is making me think about my own grandparents.
I know. It's definitely a wake-up call for all of us.
Yeah. Maybe I need to have a conversation with them about this stuff.
It's always a good idea to be proactive, especially when it comes to finances.
All right. So Washington seems to have a handle on catching abuse, but they're still dealing with a lot of it.
Especially financial exploitation.
Exactly. So let's move on to another state that caught my eye, Missouri.
Okay, what's going on in Missouri?
Well, they got a whole different problem going on.
Okay.
High rates of self-neglect among seniors.
Self-neglect. Now, how does that fit into elder abuse?
Yeah. I was wondering the same thing. Isn't abuse something that someone does to someone else?
That's a good question. And you're right in that usually we think of abuse as an active action, but self-neglect is a bit different.
So how do you define it then?
Think of it more like a lack of support leading to unsafe living conditions.
So if someone can't physically care for themselves properly?
Exactly. They might be neglecting their hygiene, their home, or even their basic needs.
That's really sad.
It is. It's a silent cry for help, indicating that someone is falling through the cracks.
So maybe Missouri isn't dealing with as much abuse from others, but they're facing this whole other issue.
Right. It's a different side of the same coin, highlighting the need for a broader understanding of elder abuse.
Makes you wonder about the support systems in place for seniors in Missouri.
Absolutely. It's something to consider as we delve further into this topic.
Okay, so we've got Washington with its high rates of overall abuse and Missouri struggling with self-neglect.
Right. Two very different situations.
Now let's throw Texas into the mix.
Texas. All right. What's happening down in the Lone Star State?
They've got a pretty high overall rate of elder abuse, too.
How high are we talking?
Over 3,100 cases per 100,000 people.
Okay, so comparable to Washington in terms of overall numbers?
Yeah, and like Missouri, they're seeing a ton of self-neglect cases.
Really? How many?
An average of 73,000 every year.
73,000.
Yeah, it's a staggering number.
It really makes you think about the adequacy of support systems for seniors in these states.
Right. Are certain states just not equipped to handle this issue?
It's a question worth exploring for sure. We're talking about a lot of vulnerable individuals who might not be getting the help they need.
This is all pretty heavy stuff, but I think it's important to talk about.
I agree. Sometimes we need to face the uncomfortable truths to find solutions.
Okay, so we've seen how elder abuse varies by state.
with some interesting patterns emerging.
But now the big question, who's behind all of this?
Right. Let's get to the heart of the matter. Who are the perpetrators?
Well, this Newsweek article cites an expert, Professor Gloria Gutman. She says that often the most common source of elder abuse is actually guardianship abuse.
Guardianship abuse. Now, that's a new one for me. I bet a lot of our listeners haven't heard of that either.
Yeah, it's not something you hear about every day. Basically, it happens when someone who's legally appointed to care for an elder.
What, you mean like someone appointed by the court?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be looking out for the elder's best interests.
Right. You'd think there'd be strict vetting and oversight for that kind of role.
You would think. But unfortunately, there are loopholes and sometimes a lack of oversight.
So you're saying someone trusted to protect a vulnerable elder could actually be taking advantage of them?
Sadly, yes.
Hmm.
Professor Gutman specifically mentions how this kind of abuse is common when elders live with family members or in nursing homes.
Where there might not be as much outside scrutiny.
Exactly. So it's not always the stranger in the shadows we need to be wary of.
Sometimes it's the people closest to the victim.
That's a chilling thought, but it's important to be aware of.
Knowledge is power. Being aware of the risks can help us protect our loved ones.
So we've seen how rates of elder abuse vary by state, and we've just scratched the surface of this complex issue of guardianship abuse.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But remember, we're doing this deep dive to understand the problem so we can be part of the solution.
Exactly. Knowledge is the first step towards making a difference.
So where do we go from here?
Well, we've explored where elder abuse is most prevalent and who might be behind it, right? But now let's talk about what you can do if you suspect someone you know is being abused.
Yeah, that's a crucial next step.
Join us in part 2 as we delve into the signs to watch out for and the steps you can take to make a difference.
Absolutely. We'll equip you with the knowledge and tools to help protect the seniors in your life.
Okay, so we've talked about some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming to think about.
Yeah, but remember, we're here to empower you, not scare you.
That's right. Knowledge is power.
Exactly, and that's why we need to talk about what you can do if you suspect someone you know is being abused.
Right, so where do we even begin?
Well, the first step is recognizing the signs.
Okay, but that's easier said than done, right?
It can be tricky, yeah.
Especially with elder abuse. It's not always obvious, is it?
You're right, it can be very subtle and often happens behind closed doors.
So what should we be looking for?
Well, unexplained injuries are definitely a red flag.
Like bruises or broken bones?
Yeah, things like that. And pay attention to how they explain those injuries.
Do they seem vague or inconsistent?
Exactly. If the stories don't add up, that's a concern.
Got it. So physical injuries are one thing.
Right.
What about behavioral changes?
Oh, absolutely. Those are crucial to watch for, too.
Like what kinds of changes?
Well, is your usually outgoing grandma suddenly withdrawn?
Okay.
Or is your grandpa, who was always so careful with his money,
Yeah.
now making strange financial decisions?
Oh, I see. So it's about noticing patterns that seem out of character.
Precisely, a sudden shift in behavior could be a sign that something's wrong.
So if my grandpa suddenly starts giving large sums of money to a new friend,
Mm-hmm.
that's a red flag.
Definitely. And don't underestimate the power of your gut feeling.
What do you mean?
If something just feels off about a situation, trust your instincts.
Okay, so physical signs,
Yeah.
behavioral changes, gut feelings.
Right, those are all important.
But what about neglect?
Ah, yes, neglect.
We talked about self-neglect in Missouri and Texas.
Right, that's a whole other issue.
How do we spot that?
Well, it can be trickier to identify, but there are signs.
Good.
Look for things like poor hygiene, an unkempt home,
Okay.
or a decline in their personal care.
So if I notice my elderly neighbor's yard is overgrown, their mail is piling up,
Yeah.
and they haven't showered in a while.
Exactly, that could be a sign of self-neglect.
Okay. So we've talked about recognizing the signs, but what do we actually do if we suspect something?
That's the key question, isn't it?
Yeah, this is where I think a lot of people get stuck.
It's understandable. It can be a difficult step to take.
So what's the best course of action?
The most important thing is to report your suspicions.
To whom? Like the police?
Well, you can involve the police if you believe a crime has been committed.
Okay.
But the primary agency for handling elder abuse cases
Yeah.
is Adult Protective Services, or APS.
APS, got it. So what do they do exactly?
They're trained to investigate reports of elder abuse and neglect.
Okay.
They can assess the situation, provide support to the victim, and connect them with the resources they need.
So even if I'm not 100% sure if it's abuse,
Right.
I should still report it.
It's always better to err on the side of caution.
Okay, because what if I'm wrong?
Well, it's better to report and let the professionals investigate than to stay silent and risk someone continuing to suffer.
That's a good point.
And remember, reporting doesn't automatically mean legal action or separation from family.
So it's not as drastic as it sounds.
It's about getting help for someone who might desperately need it.
That makes sense. But what if the suspected abuser is a family member?
That's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a really delicate situation.
I understand the hesitation.
I wouldn't want to cause a rift in the family.
Of course.
Or get someone in trouble unjustly.
But you have to prioritize the safety and well-being of the potential victim.
You're right. Family dynamics can be complicated.
Absolutely.
But elder abuse is never okay.
No matter who the perpetrator is.
Okay, so how do we navigate that?
Well, APS can actually help with that.
Really?
They can offer mediation services and support families in finding solutions.
That's good to know.
That protects the elder while addressing any underlying issues.
So calling APS isn't just about reporting.
Right.
It's about accessing a whole network of support.
Exactly. They can connect victims with legal aid counseling, financial management,
Wow.
healthcare services, all sorts of things.
Okay, so we've covered how to recognize the signs, who to report to, and the importance of prioritizing the victim's safety.
Right. Those are the key takeaways.
Now I'm thinking about how we can prevent this from happening in the first place.
Yes, prevention.
That's got to be key, right?
Absolutely. And that's what we'll dive into in our next segment.
Perfect. But before we move on, I just want to reiterate that everyone has a role to play in protecting seniors.
It's a community effort.
Don't underestimate the impact you can have by simply being aware.
Staying informed and speaking up.
When something doesn't feel right,
you could be the one to make a difference.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've talked about how to recognize the signs of elder abuse, who to report our concerns to, and the importance of putting the victim's safety first.
All crucial steps.
Now let's shift gears and talk about what we can do to prevent this from happening in the first place.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll explore some practical strategies for safeguarding our loved ones. Okay, so we've talked about recognizing the signs of elder abuse and how to report it.
Right.
But now let's get to the good stuff. How do we prevent this from happening in the first place?
Yeah, prevention is key.
So what are some strategies we can use to safeguard our loved ones?
Well, I think one of the most important things is communication. We need to have open and honest conversations with seniors about potential risks.
You mean like talking to them about financial scams and different types of abuse?
Exactly. We need to break the taboo surrounding these topics and empower them to recognize and report suspicious activity.
So it's not just about protecting them.
Right.
It's about educating them too.
Exactly. Knowledge is power.
And when they're informed, they're less likely to become victims.
Absolutely. So communication is key.
Got it. What about practical steps?
Yeah. Are there things we can do to safeguard their finances, for example?
Right. Like, are there specific things we can set up?
Well, helping them set up things like joint bank accounts or power of attorney can provide an extra layer of protection.
Okay, so they have someone they trust overseeing their finances.
Right. And you can also regularly review their bank statements and credit card activities.
Just to make sure everything looks right.
Exactly. Catch any suspicious transactions early on.
Like an extra set of eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
But what about situations where the potential abuser is a family member or a caregiver?
That's where things get tricky.
Yeah, because you trust those people.
Right. But we still need to be vigilant.
So what can we do?
Well, regular visits are important.
Okay.
Both announced and unannounced.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You can kind of check in on things.
Yeah. And it also creates an opportunity to observe the senior's well-being.
See how they're doing.
Exactly.
So it's about being present.
Right. Both physically and emotionally.
Showing them that you care and that you're paying attention.
Absolutely. And don't forget about respite care for caregivers.
No, that's a good point.
Caregiving can be incredibly stressful.
Yeah. It's a lot of work.
And burnout can increase the risk of abuse.
So giving caregivers a break can actually help prevent abuse.
Exactly. It's like the oxygen mask on an airplane analogy.
Yeah. You got to take care of yourself before you can take care of others.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about communication, practical steps, and support for caregivers.
Right.
What about technology?
Oh, technology definitely has a role to play.
I mean, seniors are online more and more these days.
They are, and there are apps and devices that can help monitor their well-being remotely.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
They can alert family members to any unusual activity or changes in routine.
So it's like a safety net.
In a way, yeah. And technology can also connect seniors with support services and social networks.
So it can help reduce isolation?
Right. Which can make them more vulnerable.
So technology can be both good and bad.
It's a double-edged sword.
But if we use it wisely, it can be a powerful tool for protection.
Absolutely.
Huh.
But at the end of the day, the most effective prevention strategy is building strong, supportive relationships with our seniors.
I love that.
When they know they're loved and valued and supported, they're less likely to be targeted or manipulated.
That's such an important message.
It really is. We can have all the safeguards and technology in the world,
Yeah.
but nothing replaces the human touch.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive.
it has been.
We've explored some dark corners, but I think we've come out of it with a sense of hope.
I hope so. We've learned that elder abuse is a complex issue, but it's not insurmountable.
We can make a difference.
Absolutely. By understanding the risks, recognizing the signs, and taking proactive steps to protect our loved ones.
We can all contribute to creating a safer world for seniors.
It's the goal.
We've seen how rates of elder abuse vary across the U.S., with Washington, Missouri, and Texas standing out.
Right.
We learned that financial exploitation and guardianship abuse are major concerns, and sadly, these issues are likely to become even more prevalent in the future.
That's the unfortunate reality.
But here's the thing, knowledge is power. By understanding the signs and being aware of the risks, we can all help protect our aging loved ones and communities. So what stood out to you today? What will you do differently going forward? Keep that conversation going. And remember, you're not alone in this. There are resources available, and there are people who care. If you suspect someone is being abused, don't hesitate to reach out for help. Your voice could be the one that makes all the difference. That's a great reminder. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay compassionate.